All right, guys, what's going on? What's going on? Welcome in. So in this one, I'm joined by my buddy DKB. What's up, man? How you doing?
What's good, boss? It's a good day. It's a good day. Finally into the off season. I think honestly, we've all been waiting on this for a long time, right? The season was over pretty early for us.
Yeah, dude. I mean, obviously, tons of new changes, new general manager, new head coach, new front office. We're starting to see some names pile in, new coaching staff. And I think we could really start there, man. Like, I feel like the coaching staff, I don't want to say it's like split right down the middle with the fan base, like 50-50, but I definitely feel like the coaches that they're bringing in, it's pretty debatable, right? There's a lot of different opinions out there. Some fans wanted more experience. Some fans are kind of excited for all these new names and, new opportunities. Aaron Glenn is one thing, but when you start looking at the coordinators, the Steve Wilkses, the Inkstrands, where do you kind of stand with these hires? Do you like them, or would you prefer to go elsewhere with them?
Yeah, for the most part, I enjoy them. Right, I think you have two big question marks, which objectively speaking, I think stands. Tanner Engstrand, just because he's a rookie coming into his role, and then Steven Hayden, our new O line
Mhm.
coach. Right, so one has a level of experience, at least as an assistant O line coach. Steve Engstrand is essentially going to be a new role, right? And so I think a lot of us are planning on seeing a veteran get added in there, maybe some kind of advisor position, whatever they want to title it. But I think ultimately, a lot of people are making the argument that this is kind of Robert Saleh replicated, right? Rookie OC, rookie head coach, potentially rookie quarterback here. I think the sum of the parts with this staff that's lined under Aaron Glenn and him immediately coming in with a vision, not necessarily a motto, which I think Robert Saleh had the leadership, but it felt like more so he had a motto and not a lot of support to kind of back that up. Aaron Glenn feels like he's on a little bit more of a different scale. You actually have a vision. You can see with the coaching staff how people are aligning under kind of how he was groomed under Bill Parcells, what he highlights in like leadership traits and stuff. So I love the combination of experience. I love even some of these youthful additions that at least have excelled in their roles. So I think it's a good start so far overall.
When you look at a guy in like Tanner Inkstrand, right? Like it's so controversial, right? Because it's like the Jets are known. I want to say maybe not necessarily just last season, but last 5-10 years. Like you think of the Jets, if you're whatever, a Saints fan, a Panthers fan, you think of the Jets. What do you think of? You think of a good defense. You think of a defensive head coach. You think of quarterback questions and offensive struggles. Really, for the most part, missing the playoffs and stuff like that. But like the primary issue with this team has always been on the offensive side of the football. And, with Aaron Glenn being that defensive guy. And by the way, who knows if he's going to contribute more so to the offensive side of the football compared to, Todd Bowles, a Rex Ryan, of course, Robert Saleh. Maybe he actually does contribute and have some solid ideas and have, some, new creative philosophies that he could bring to the table. I'm hoping so, but I'm not going to sit here and bet on it because we've heard that before, right? Where, I mean, all of last season we were here, all of last offseason, we were hearing that Saleh was going to be more involved with the offensive side. But
Question for you
yeah,
along that line of thinking, if this doesn't interrupt things. So we know what Aaron Glenn's background. He took like the scouting piece for a couple years. We know he's touched on the fact that he's not just a defensive coach, right? He's planning on working both sides of the ball. But there's a big point made that he spends a lot of his offseason or at least free time kind of consulting with like OCs at the NFL college level and stuff. Do you see that kind of being an advantage or playing a big role in him maybe being over there in offensive meeting rooms and kind of being able to provide some of that guidance?
I do think so. But I'm not going to go as far as to say, okay, he's Matt LaFleur, he's McVay, Shanahan, Reed, Sean Payton, all these different Mike McDaniel, all these different offensive coaches that are really just they feel really established with what they want to do, their vision, their play calling, and just the overall offensive structure, right? So with Glenn not calling the offense, I don't think it's going to be Aaron Glenn's offense. I think Tanner's probably going to have a huge role in that, right? It's going to be him doing it, installing it, potentially developing a quarterback, like you said, calling plays. There's it's a big job. And so that's again kind of to make it full circle. that's the big controversy. It's like, hey, here we are again, rookie head coach, defensive mind, first year OC. How do you and to be fair, it's not like we had our choice between like 5 different like elite offensive minds and we just decided to go like, out of the box thinking with Tanner Engstrand. And even though he has a really good resume, are you concerned with the potential speed bumps along the way, whether it's this season or in 2026?
Yeah, I think you have to be, right? So one of the things I would say is part of Aaron Glenn's job being the head coach is not just evaluating the roster and the players. He needs to evaluate his coaching staff as well, right? So with rookies in their roles, there's going to be a level of projection here, right? Can Tanner Engstrand make a acceptable jump from passing game coordinator to OC? One of the things that comforts me is we consider Ben Johnson potentially to be maybe a tier below of some of those top minds in the NFL, right? That's why he's been coveted for the last 2-3 years. Tanner Engstrand is being groomed by a new innovative mind. You're talking about a offense both through the air and on the ground that has been elite, right? You're talking top 3 in most of the important statistical categories. So I think the innovation that we expect to see with under Tanner Engstrand, right? I don't think you're talking about a basic, dual West Coast offense or us just running the ball 20 times for the sake of running it and then trying to have an elite passing attack or efficient passing attack, I should say. But I'm a little bit comforted by the fact that he's at least been at a level that very few in his role would be at, right? So when I think about the leadership he's been centered around, when I think about the fact that he's already coming in with the expectation that I need to provide greatness from day one, yes, there's going to be question marks, but I think he has Scott Turner ahead of him that he can turn to, right, to bounce some ideas off of. Potentially another veteran mind, consult Aaron Glenn, at least in terms of the vision, if things are looking. But I think one of the issues we fell into with Mike LaFleur, he never really had somebody to look to. But in this case, Tanner Engstrand's already got a leg up on a guy like LaFleur. And I think plenty of people, I think arguably LaFleur, let's say we had access to him somehow, I think people would have still accepted him on this roster, on this new coaching staff, based on what he was able to do, right? And the highlight being the top 5 passing offense, whatever we were, with anybody not named Zach Wilson. People still liked a lot of what he did. So, yeah, question marks, but I think we have answers in place to address those. Will we execute on those? Who knows? But I think we have the resources in the building to be able to pull it off this time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like it's a big roll of the dice from Aaron Glenn. But one thing that's given me some confidence here is in that intro presser, like he's really nailing on all of the issues and negatives from the Jets, like this past season, right? Talking about accountability, talking about leadership, not putting one player, Aaron Rodgers, above the team. It's like we're all in this together. And so in other words, it kind of felt like Glenn really like it felt like he was a Jet fan to a certain degree. Like he knew exactly what happened this past season. He knew where the issues were. And obviously, if you know that much, right, the Jets well enough to that extent, you got to know that the offensive side of the football has just been it's been a mess, right? Hackett and Zach and QB questions, injuries, drops, penalties. It's just one issue after the next. So I have a really hard time seeing Aaron Glenn not take that position seriously. And I don't think the job would have been given to Engstrand if there wasn't that 100% confidence in his abilities. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. Were you surprised at the list at all? Because I know off the top of my mind, like Nick Caley, Tanner Engstrand seemed like 1 and 2 is some variation of the top options. I don't remember there being a veteran necessarily that stood out as like a front runner for us per se.
Yeah, I mean, I know there were. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was gonna just wrap it up. I was gonna say, even if you want to go with Caley being your preference, you're still talking about a rookie at his position, right? So it seems like maybe we preferred somebody with some freshness, I guess. Somebody that's not necessarily encumbered by some former veteran decisions or something of that sort. But were you kind of shocked by that, or did you think we were going to go in a different direction?
When the news first broke, I was thinking, whoa, rookie head, sorry, not rookie head coach, rookie OC option, Nick Caley, rookie OC option, Ingstrand. Like it just felt like there was a lot of, again, it felt like a roll of the dice. I was expecting, to be fair, we did see Todd Haley's name pop up a little bit, which if he wants to join the Jets staff, I would welcome him on. I think that'd be an awesome addition. But I was surprised to a certain degree. But I'm trying to put myself in the shoes, of Aaron Glenn. I mean, when they first took over in Detroit, Anthony Lynn was the OC, and I felt like he would have been, a solid OC option because he has that head coaching experience. He's called plays before. He's been on just a handful of different teams. He's worked with Glenn, but they ended up firing him, and Ben Johnson took over. So maybe Aaron Glenn is thinking like, you know what, like we might, and not comparing Ingstrand to Ben Johnson or even Nick Haley to that matter, but maybe Glenn is under the assumption of, hey, maybe those fresh ideas, those, guys that are in the shadows working behind the scenes, those are the guys that we really feel like can take this offense over the top, as opposed to the OC where we kind of know what to expect from, not only just from, from an internal perspective, but also the other teams are going to somewhat know, play calling tendencies and what he likes to do as an offensive coordinator, just from a structure standpoint. But with Steve Wilks, I wanted to get your thoughts on Wilks here, because this to me was, I'm not going to sit here and call Steve Wilks a top 5 defensive mind in football. I'm just not going to go that far. I just don't think that's a fact. But I think it's a solid option. All things considered, with the head coaching experience, with the same kind of, a similar defense that he's ran before in the past. Been labeled as a player's coach, but really strict and no BS at the same time. What do you make of Steve Wilks?
Yeah, I think ultimately it's a smart hire, right? I think that's the bottom line with it. If Aaron Glenn wanted to live up to the expectation of, I don't want to have to worry about play calling, I want to manage the flow of the game, I want to be, concerned with, do I need to throw this flag out there to challenge a play, etc. Steve Wilks is a smart hire. He's done a solid job with the 49ers. He's done generally a solid job with every stop that he's been at. I know the big question mark is, why does nobody want to keep you? So hopefully we get some answers, right? I think we'll hear from the DC probably at some point during the offseason, after the draft, I would assume. But with Steve Wilks, it opens up the playbook, right? He can run a 3-4 front. He can run a 4-3. He's a guy that's had experience along with Aaron Glenn in terms of being able to evaluate and identify secondary members. So when you talk about the safety room rebuild, for example, I think you'll get a huge boost and benefit there. And he kind of shares that same mentality of Aaron Glenn. So when I look at it, is really, regardless of who you put higher, right, Steve Wilks or Aaron Glenn, I think is really an extension of Aaron Glenn already being on that defensive side of the ball ultimately. So the message will be clear. It'll be consistent. You won't have to worry about having to babysit and hold his hand. And you can really sit there and try to be innovative. Now you can wonder if you want to have some of those college, safety, joker type roles and things like that, that you can play around with. But the defense, you have your stars as a blank book. Steve Wilks can come in, and much like he did with the 49ers, if you feel like you have the talent of a top 10 defense, he can really help you kind of achieve and live up to that.
Totally agree, man. Totally agree. I think it's a great point about, just the background in secondary members, defensive backs as a whole. Really, really good point. But to shift gears away from the coaching staff and focusing on the quarterback position, right? Another big question mark. Aaron Rodgers, the cap hit this season, the cap hit next season. If he stays, does he retire? Is he playing for another team? I don't see any team trading for him at this point. Just my opinion. I just can't see another team taking on the contract. Are you in the camp of, hey, you want Rodgers back, or are you more so leaning, let's move on?
I used to be far left in absolutely Aaron Rodgers needs to go. I just feel like this is the closest thing to a complete reset we've had, right? Even with Robert Saleh, we had the lingering question of, do you keep Sam Darnold or do you try to start fresh and, work around a new cap situation there? Aaron Rodgers, the player, the on-field guy, I think his skills, as we saw last year, diminished, maybe a lot of that due to injury, but he's still a player I think you can win with. I don't know if we get playoffs, but I think somewhere in like the 7-9 range, if the defense returns and stuff, would probably be what we're looking at. But I think you could also still pull that out of a guy like Tyrod Taylor, right? Or give you a more acceptable chance to develop somebody under Tyrod. Aaron Rodgers, the persona, I wouldn't want anything to do with, right? I would expect Aaron Glenn will put stipulations on him returning. And that's even before you get into the cap number. That's before you get into if he has any more pre-planned trips coming up for OTAs. I wouldn't want to see him on Pat McAfee anymore, right? I think one of the things that irked me last year about Rodgers was he mentioned a lot about distractions in the building. And whether he was oblivious to it or not, he was a pretty big part of that, right? We'd always hear something coming out from Pat McAfee, or he'd be on some other random podcast or show that comes up. And it ultimately ends up biting us, right? It's a Woody Johnson soundbite, or it's something to cause backlash on Robert Saleh, or something that we were looking to do that Robert Saleh now has to kind of course correct on. Trying to think what the situation was last year. But I remember there being some banter around maybe moving some players around or something like that. And Robert Saleh said he had one vision for it. Aaron Rodgers had another, and we ended up going in Rodgers' direction, right? But ultimately, I think we need to move on. Avoid all of the additional distractions you can. Just focus purely on player development in year one. I think that's the biggest goal that we need. We know that we have a foundational core in place. I think if you can solidify a few more backup positions and stuff like that, year two is when you can make a huge investment in quarterback, right? In the 2026 draft class, it's supposed to be one of those top tier phenomenal ones. I think there's like 6 guys projected in round 1 already. So that would kind of be my plan. I would be totally comfortable with Tyrod Taylor and then a combination of maybe a rookie or another vet or something to kind of round out the room.
Yeah, dude, that 2026 draft class is looking sweet, man. There's so many top names out there. So many guys that I feel like would be great fits for the Jets. I'm not going to go as far as to say it was like last season where you have just, star after star after star. But I would say right now, of course, we still have a whole, season of college football, but I think it's close. I do think it's honestly close. But I mean, man, you hit on a bunch of points with Rodgers, of course, off the field with the interviews, with potentially being a distraction. I think another thing that needs to be mentioned as well is how does he flow with the offense, right? Is he going to come in and be combative with what the brand new OC wants to do, the first year guy? Could he potentially say like, "Hey, man, no, I'm not doing that. This my way is better. This way is the more." Maybe it's the more calculated way of doing it, or I want freedom at the line of scrimmage to do whatever I want, to change plays, to get into specific looks based off of what I'm seeing, which I don't necessarily think is a bad idea. Like, I like my coaches to tailor the offense towards the quarterback, but I don't want to be in this situation where we were like, last season, where it's Rodgers' team, Rodgers' players, Rodgers' offensive system that he wants. We're rolling out the coaches that Rodgers wants, and everything is tailored towards Aaron Rodgers. And, I think it'd be different if he was 33, 32 years old, but he's going to be 41, I believe, in the season. And to me, like, again, cap situation aside, like, you're probably looking at one season. It's just a big roll of the dice for me. One season for a 41-year-old bridge quarterback that's going to cost that much. And then you also have, the concerns with the system, the coaching staff, him maybe doing stuff that he's never done before. To kind of end with the last point that I feel like is relevant is this whole Rodgers injury potential, right? Because the excuse this season was, okay, well, yes, he played all 17 games, but he was hurt. He was dealing with the knee and the ankle and all these things. I mean, what happens if we start next season? We decide to bring Rodgers back. We give him whatever it is, the 25 mil this season, the 60 plus mil in 2026. And he gets hurt in week 3 and he's out for 10 weeks. And we're rolling Tyrod, Jordan Travis or Tyrod out there anyway. So I think it's just a big, big investment. And ultimately, I just don't think he's going to be back.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things that doesn't fall on like deaf ears for me, just talking to a lot of the fans, seeing kind of how other coaches and executives have talked about us around the league, I don't think any team has ever catered as much to a quarterback as we did over these 2 years with Aaron Rodgers, bringing in all of the free agent wish list, bringing in the OC that he preferred, running the scheme that he wants, giving him the power to audible or, I remember them saying he gets a play, but he has, 6 different options that he can audible to based on how he's, reading the pre-snap defense. He's had absolutely everything that he's wanted, and health got in his way. If you want to use that as an excuse, right? It ultimately produced 5 wins. I don't know what more you can do for Aaron Rodgers to help, get him over the top there. So why not reset? Why not, take the early hit, try to get your cat back under restraint, move forward with a plan? One of the things I'm curious for your thoughts on with this is I do think what we did for Aaron Rodgers last year was good from the standpoint that you gave him everything he needed to succeed, right? We just didn't execute on the things that we needed to. Do you think Aaron Glenn has kind of set up his coaching staff for the same thing? I know we still have big question marks around what kind of quarterback we may want to see and different things like that, but do you kind of see an early vision in play for everybody being aligned on how we want to get, the most important position for us developed?
It's tough, man. Like my assumption based off of what we've not only just seen with the coaching staff and front office, but also from that intro presser and just kind of where looking at Aaron Glenn's resume, he was a part of New Orleans. He goes to Detroit and flips them around, like completely turns them around. To me, that model is what's trying to be built with the Jets, which is adding a lot of former players to the coaching staff, right? Commanding that instant respect. The people that are going to be coaching you, teaching you, putting you in the best position to have success, they've done it before. They've been in your shoes. And in some cases, they've been long-time NFL players. And if they're not, a former player, they've either been around a great coach like Ingstrand with, Campbell and Ben Johnson aside, like Jim Harbaugh or Steve Wilkes. He's been around the game for such a long time. I feel like Aaron, like just the way the Jets are kind of building this thing out feels very reminiscent to when Dan Campbell first took over in Detroit, where they're like, hey, Mark, adding all these former players and saying, you know what, we're gonna try to shoot for long-term plays. We're gonna come up with our draft board and we're gonna stick to it, whether that means, everyone hating the Jahmyr Gibbs pick. We love him as a player. We're gonna select him because he fits what we want to do, both from an on-field system standpoint, but also off the field toughness, mental toughness side of things as well. And it's kind of hard because we haven't seen a free agent practice or a free agent signing. We haven't seen a draft pick. We don't have those solidified answers. But that's just kind of my assumption right now, which is I think the Jets are going to be more so investing in the long-term options as opposed to quick Band-Aid, short turnarounds. What can we do this season to knock off the Bills? Like what's the fastest way to do that just to end the playoff drought? And then after that season, we're just left saying, now what? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, 100%. It's one of the biggest fears that I've had. And I don't expect this under Aaron Glenn just based on the energy that he gives off and how he's spoken about kind of turning things around here and his experience. But you have to question it, right? Especially Woody Johnson, that presence still being there. We know what the rush is going to be like. We know what a certain section of the fan base is already saying as well. But I'm excited, man. It leaves a ton of draft options open. I know you've seen some of the free agent names and stuff that may be out there as well, right? From like the Broncos, the Lions and stuff. Is there anybody exciting that's kind of stood out to you that you really like to see here?
Dude, former Dolphin, man, Javon Holland. I think he'd be a great fit for the Jets. Now, downside, you're probably gonna have to give him a ton of money, not like making the highest paid safety or anything. Because his production, like he was just fantastic early in his career, and it started to dip down. Still, great player, but just from an overall production standpoint, and yeah, there were different DCs involved, but I think Javon Holland, 25 years old, man, I think that makes a lot of sense. Justin Reed at safety, I think makes sense. Onzarike, the D tackle, if he wants, because Detroit has a lot of cap space, but they just gave McNeil a huge contract. I just don't see them double dipping with both of their young defensive tackles, giving them both, big money deals. So I think Levi makes a lot of sense for this Jets team to go pair him up right next to Quinn Williams.
Yeah, for sure. Levi, I'm definitely excited about. There's not a ton. So I've seen the general names just from the standpoint of like where Darren Muji and Glenn's background are. There's some connections to the Panthers that I know Steve Wilkes has for guys that they expect to be free agents. So I'm looking at, I don't know what the investment will look like in the secondary, right? Obviously, it's going to be a huge renovation there, but Jeremy Chin is a name that I look at as an underrated addition. I think would be super solid for us.
Yeah, man. Go. Did you have another player in mind or now? I was gonna cut you off.
No. You're good. I was trying to think of who it was, but the name escaped me. Yeah. You're good though.
Yeah, man. There's I think this free agency class it's a bit weird, right? Because the Jets need a tight end, and there's not really that like one that just screams, "Hey, perfect fit." I mean, you could probably argue Conklin is the number one tight end to hit the market. Like, if you say that, I'm not gonna push back. Right tackle, I'm thinking maybe a Jedrick Wills, but I feel like he could have a pretty big market, for a young right tackle option that kind of needs to bounce back. But yeah, I could very well see him signing like a short 1-year prove it deal. Could that team be with the Jets? But free agency aside, what, not necessarily saying give me your number one option with that 7th overall pick, but who are some of the either players or positions that you're thinking, okay, like early out, we still have the combine, pro days, all these different things. Is there maybe a couple guys that you're thinking, hey, this guy would be a great fit, realistically speaking, of course.
Yeah,
Or even
so
positions.
it's hard because I think at 7, even though you're missing out on like, whatever the top quarterback options, I've seen a lot of change there. Ironically enough, like Dart being the third best QB, Shador Sanders falling, stuff like that. But you take them aside, you push aside maybe us not investing a top pick in a right tackle. I think probably the one that makes the most clear sense right now is probably McMillan, Ted McMillan, if he ends up falling to us. Big X, guy's just solid. He's produced great numbers over his last 3 years. He probably can actually take another leap, and I've heard people compare him to Mike Evans to a certain degree. I haven't looked at a lot of these clear guys just yet, these top guys a lot yet, but I think Ted McMillan makes the most sense. And then if not, I'm still a big fan of trading back right now. I think we could do a lot of damage with dropping back a couple of picks, open stuff up at that point. I know the tight end from Penn State is a name that's been making a lot of noise recently, and I think it's because people started throwing out Rob Gronkowski comparisons for him. So obviously you love that, but how realistic is it that you get, a Brock Bowers type season? I think even with Rob, he did like 600-700 yards his rookie season, which is still really good, and a pair of touchdowns. So if you get something like that, I guess it's a win. But Ted McMillan is kind of my odds-on favorite right now with just the loose, look that I've had at top 32 draft board or so.
Yeah, dude, 100%. And like another thing that I feel like we should piggyback off of is with the wide receiver position, what, if we do move on from Rodgers and Devontae's traded or released or, what have you, all of a sudden we're looking at a wide receiving core because I'm again, much like Devontae Adams, I would assume that Lazard is going to be gone as well.
Yeah.
We're looking at Garrett Wilson, Corley, and Gibson, and we're going to need someone else on the outside. And I don't necessarily think the Jets are in a position to give T. Higgins top tier wide receiver money. I think he's probably going to have a lot of interest out there from tons of different teams. That's just going to be a bidding war. I could see that lasting maybe like 2-3 days. Do you want to have that, contract just laying out there for T? I don't know. It doesn't really feel like a great fit. While also at the same time, potentially dealing with a Garrett Wilson extension / trade request. We don't really know what the stand, where he stands with that. Only time will tell. But dude, if we lose Adams, if we lose Lazard, all of a sudden McMillan he would come in and be a huge, huge boost. So I like that pick, man.
Yeah, day one starter. I think the name just jumped back into my mind. I don't know why I didn't think of this initially, but if we trade back, I think the guy in terms of another wide receiver weapon I love the most right now is probably Emeka Egbuka. He looks like a certified day one guy. I know he hasn't lived up to the promise necessarily as a guy with all of the athleticism. I think before forget the name of their rookie that's just been dominating everybody right now, but before he came in, Emeka Egbuka was looked at as one of those guys that probably will finish top 3 in Ohio State lore. But I think he just has a skill set that screams his ability to go out there and just completely destroy people in the slot. Or you could loosely probably use him in an X role since he does have a little bit of size to him. But he's a guy that I would also be really, really excited about pairing. And then also he has the chemistry with Garrett Wilson, right? So I think there may be something that can be said for giving Garrett Wilson like another confidant, another guy that comes from the same background. I've heard him talk up, the Ohio State wide receiver coach quite a bit in terms of the mentality that he coaches those guys up and brings them in with. So I think that would also be a huge boost. But yeah, we'll have to see how it shakes out. I do think the background for some of these guys, I know the Broncos tend to like to trade around a little bit. So I'm hoping that does lean towards us being able to pick up a couple more picks here.
Definitely. I think, so this draft to me reminds me a lot of last season where the Jets can go in a bunch of different ways. We think back to last season, whether it was Olu or Brian Thomas or Bowers or Joe Alt falls, Ramo Dunze falls, Neighbors fall. The Jets could have went with like 6 or 7 different guys and I would have been totally pumped with, right? This season, it kind of feels similar, like McMillan. I mean, the list just... we can kind of probably collab a second time with all these different draft prospects when it gets closer to the draft, because we're going to have risers, we're going to have fallers as this whole thing goes out. But I think right now, honestly, Will Johnson would make a lot of sense in my opinion, the corner from Michigan. But of course, right. First order of business is free agency. Which guys are the Jets going to be targeting? I don't think we're going to be bringing in that many vets. I think for the free agents, it's going to be more so the younger guys, 25, 26 years old, or guys that are, considered like the great leaders, someone who, or, players that can help kind of instill the Aaron Glenn, Steve Wilkes leadership model.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point, because I think Levi, the DT, I want to say he's 28 or 30, somewhere in that range. The only thing that concerns me is I know a lot of the Lions players that we may target are coming off injury, right? So there's that risk. But along the same thinking, between draft and free agency, do you think that puts a lot more pressure on us to try to find a quarterback in free agency if we don't necessarily want to use a draft pick in this draft on somebody?
Not really, man, because what are the options? Basically, I don't want the Jets to reach, whether that's a Jackson Dart in round 2, giving out a big contract to like one of these like lesser tier quarterbacks, like a Jameis Winston or Mariota. Like the way I'm kind of looking at the quarterback position right now is I would roll out Tyrod. I would roll out Jordan Travis. I would look to maybe trade for one of these younger quarterbacks that we haven't really seen all that much of, like Hendon Hooker or Sam Howell, someone like that. If that team wants to, part ways with that quarterback for like a 4th or a 5th round pick, I think I would much rather do that as opposed to invest with spot number 7 or 47. And then all of a sudden, depending on how that quarterback looks in year 1, in the first year of everything, does that take us out of the stacked quarterback class in 2026? Because, oh no, we just took this player this past draft, so I think, it's interesting, man. I think the quarterback position has got to be figured out, but it's not a position where I'm going to sit here and reach at. If I was Darren Muji, like if I fall in love with someone, okay, I'll make the move, but I would much rather take one late as opposed to early in this class specifically. And then for by the way, for Sam Darnold, I just don't see him coming back.
Yeah, no, I've seen that rumor out there. PTSD is real for some of these players coming off of what they suffered through with us, for sure. I think Sam Howell's still high on my list. I know I wanted him a year or 2 ago when he was looked at as an option to be able to be trade bait in the offseason. But I'm fully on board with really just building out the infrastructure this year. Set things in play, right? Solidify the rest of the offensive line. Try to find another weapon or two, whether that's tight end, wide receiver. Get the defense back on track, and then now you have a recipe to bring in a rookie, because it's going to be a gamble either way, right? I was just listening to the Ravens GM Eric DeCosta. He did an interview with Todd McShay, and he was kind of talking about how they crafted their vision around being able to develop and build up Lamar Jackson. So I think there's a similar pathway here for the New York Jets along that line of thinking. But yeah, if we reach for somebody and we don't have the plan in play or at least the infrastructure around them, I think we're going to run into the same situation, right? It doesn't matter if you pick a Will Howard in, round 3, round 4. I think there's still going to be that pressure there just for the sake of us having picked a quarterback relatively early,
I see.
especially
Yeah.
compared to whatever, their projection is that we need to get him on the field and see what it is, or it's a wasted pick.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It's a really good point. Yeah, like I said, and who knows? Maybe Rodgers is back. We don't really know how these things are going to play out. And to be honest, I don't think the Jets know as of right now. Filming this in early February, I think there's probably some big questions that they have to, obviously figure out as well. But, dude, is there anything else that you wanted to cover? I feel like we tackled a lot.
Yeah, no, I think we touched based on a lot of important ones. I don't know if you've seen this, by the way. I think the rumor that was out there was Aaron Glenn needed a decision by Super Bowl for Rodgers.
Huh. Well, we got a couple more days left, at least from the record. I'm not sure when this video is going to get uploaded, but who knows, man? Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. No, I'm all good. Dope conversation. Enjoyed the questions and everything. Appreciate it.
Awesome. So for everyone watching, of course, you could go check out DKB. His YouTube channel will be listed down below in the description box. Thanks so much for everyone hanging out watching. And this was a longer one here. We both appreciate it. As always, go Jets.